So it is 2 after, and if you don't mind, Julie, I'd like to kind of get started. Again, this will be recorded, so those people who didn't make it on the call for whatever reason can revisit this conversation. So what I'd like to do is to talk a little bit just about some concepts. Just 5-10 minutes over some concepts, and then go into the experience that I hope that people had or can at least reflect on by sometime this weekend. So when I come back over to our kind of our worksheets, and these are the pieces that I was really hoping we could spend some time thinking through and talking through in terms of my delivery. So we talked a little bit last time about the nature of human beings and the truths about human beings, that people can learn, change, and grow, that people do what they think works even when it doesn't work, when it's not getting them towards their goal. They still do that. That all human behavior is goal-directed, and that attitude is a response to goal achievement. So the attitude itself is giving us information that we may want to pay attention to. So the next piece that I kind of want to touch on is just this idea that the relationship between diversity and inclusion. So diversity is the recognition of commonalities and differences. So these shapes are very much different, but they also are in a family of shapes, right? So they have some similarities and they have differences. But inclusion is maximizing those similarities and differences towards a goal, right? So towards a goal. And so if you look at this diagram of some of the buildings in Dallas, it's easy to see how the diversity of shapes is maximized in the construction of these buildings, right? So hopefully you'll be able to see the circles and triangles and squares and other variations of that shape, which really is a metaphor for how we should be engaging our classrooms, right? So too often, and early in my teaching career, I oftentimes fell short because the kids who spoke the loudest or had the fastest answer or were the most rambunctious got lots of my attention, but those students that were more quiet or slower to speak or more thoughtful, I didn't give as much attention in my early teaching days. And their contributions are just as important as these other students. And so working on this idea of inclusion. And then there's the concept of equity versus equality, right? And many of us have seen these diagrams kind of played out in social media and in maybe trainings or whatnot. So I am not an anarchist. So I believe in I believe in rules and order and structure and having lanes and parking lots, right? So I really appreciate those and lanes on the road. However, when we think about equity, and equality, sometimes I wonder. I think we focus on the wrong things. And so sometimes we focus on the boxes and where those boxes are placed and who's on each of those boxes, when in fact, the question we probably should be asking is, what is the function of our interactions, right? And so in the diagram here, you can see these 3 panels, but once we answer an essential question, it becomes easier to figure out how to meet people's needs, right? So what is the function of that fence? And is it meeting our needs? Is it helpful? Do we need a fence? And so sometimes in our classrooms, we create these artificial barriers because this is what we've always done, or this is how we know to do things. And if we want to have inclusive environments, we may need to just and think about critically what it is that we're doing in our classroom. And then lastly, and then we'll get into your reflections of this week's lessons, is this idea of a garden, right? And so sometimes you'll hear people say, and I'm not sure in your circles, but certainly in mine, I've heard people say, I don't see blank difference, whatever. So whether it's race or gender or sexual orientation, they say, I don't see that. I treat people all the same. or people are people to me. And on the surface, that sounds like a wonderful or benign way of looking at the world, when in fact, if we look at the purpose of some of that behavior, we could recognize that mindset or that way of thinking could actually be detrimental to our students, to our classrooms, right? So here's a picture of a fern, a cactus, and a bonsai. Now, one could argue that they all need the same thing, right? So, they all need to be watered. And that would be true. However, there are some uniquenesses about the trees that I have to recognize in terms of how I give them what they need. And trees don't talk, plants don't talk, but they do give me information as to what it is that they need. So if I overwater a fern, how does that fern tell me that it's not getting what it needs? And you can unmute yourselves.
I'm not. I think ferns get droopy, or do they something happen? They turn brown, or something. I think it's easy to tell. Like they let you know in some way, like they change and don't look healthy.
Right. So they don't look healthy. They change in some way. They may go brown. They may get yellow. But so they will tell me when I'm doing something that is helpful to them, right? The cactus will not, if I either overwater or underwater it, it will let me know, right? And the bonsai will respond with the dropping of leaves or the perkiness of the branches, right? So to treat all of these plants the same does not, it's easy for me, but it doesn't do the plants justice. And so when we think about even in our classrooms, we want to have this universality. So I have to have water on hand, but how I administer that water really is important to the plant, the student, the customer. And I have to have a relationship with them to understand what it is that they need, right? And so because I'm watching this fern, I can recognize when I'm not giving it what it needs, right? Because I have this cactus in my environment and I'm interacting with it on a regular basis. I now recognize when things aren't the way that this cactus needs it to be. And so, any thoughts on those three concepts? Any thoughts on those? Helpful, not helpful? Heard it before? Thoughts?
I had never seen the culture as garden before, but that's I like how it illustrates some of those pieces and kind of talking about the idea that I treat everyone the same isn't achieving the goals that everyone needs. And I hadn't seen the liberation on the equity and equality.
Okay.
So the idea of like, wait, what purpose is the fence serving?
Yeah.
So, thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Other folks.
On the diversity versus inclusion section, I had a really good, I like this analogy, but something that always sticks in my head is something that I learned a while ago at a leadership conference as a student, was that diversity you can kind of define as inviting everybody to the party. Inclusion is getting everybody on the dance floor.
And can I raise you one?
Yes.
Metaphor that that equity is also making sure that people have the music that they appreciate, right? So I like that metaphor. I've heard that too. That's a wonderful metaphor. Thank you. Other folks, I thought I saw someone else. Did they jump out? Oh, Kevin, hopefully we as educators can provide comfortable environments for students to express their needs. Yep. And Kristen Copeland, thoughts? I saw you kind of jump in and jump out.
I know, I'm so sorry. I'm at my parents' house and the internet is crazy and trying to get on and their computer doesn't have any audio or anything. So I'm so sorry for disrupting. I have seen the equity versus equality. I love the liberation piece of that the first time that I saw that. And I apologize, I missed a portion of your garden discussion, but I'm excited to go back and listen to it after this is recorded. Thank you.
You're welcome. So those are just some of the thoughts that I'd like for us to think about as we reflect on the activities for this week. So I'll open up the floor to any ahas or things you found interesting in the activities that we delivered. And then if we have time, we can go through each individual one and talk about them. But just in general, impressions, things that you thought about the activities from this week. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just in watching the Boys of Baraka, I had a pretty strong response to that, and actually stopped it partway through because it was really frustrating, and especially seeing when the boys got to the school and where it was and what it wasn't what I expected, and I was. Frankly angry because it didn't seem like the folks there were well trained at all in some of the techniques that they were using. And I'll be honest, I was shocked to find out that the staff and the leadership was white, and was surprised that they were, they didn't seem to be integrated into part of the community where they were located. And yeah, I was pretty angry by the time I was done watching that, and the idea that there seemed to be kind of this like savior principle, like we have to extract and save these boys and take them here, and we know what's best for them. And I understand the difference between intent and impact, but yeah, that was a tough one to watch for me.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Julie.
I had a reaction to the lady that was the recruiter for the boys, and my heart just went out to her. Like, that has to be a hard job to begin with, but how discouraging to have that just feel like it's crumbling between your fingers when you're working so hard. And I just really appreciated her and her passion for what she was doing. And there should have been, like Julie said, more like her in the leadership of what was going on, and I think it maybe would have had a better outcome for all of them.
Yeah, so, and I'm not too sure what everyone's experience is in the classroom and that kind of thing, but I know that I have had those experiences where everything does crumble in your hands, right? As a teacher. So one of my lead HIV educators in the K-12. And so we would go out and do these community things, and people, we had lists of people asking for our trainers to come and do HIV AIDS training and all, in presentations and stuff. And we did that with the American Red Cross. So we weren't rogue, right? So we did this in partnership with the Red Cross, and one of my lead educators, her senior year, gets pregnant, right? And I'm like, however, that was life, right? So sometimes these things that we think are crumbling around, it is just life. And I think she experienced that. And I think that sobered her as well, right? Like, this is just life. So why do you think I would introduce that film with its grittiness early in this conversation of equity and diversity? And what do you think I was after?
I think it's an excellent point. I think regardless of the leadership, of the school itself, I think the point is that these boys are kind of chained to their zip code, so to speak, chained to the socioeconomic status they were born into, and that by removing them from that environment, regardless of how, there was some impact, there was some positive impact on some of those boys. I'm curious as to why, when they returned, and maybe the discussion or more research is required, but why when they returned, some of them did so well, but then there was others that just fell, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Some of them still did really well, but then others fell right back to, old habits.
So this is this is the crux of why I wanted to present this. When we start talking about equity and we start talking about in classroom settings, because you'll hear people say this, they'll say, we need to give our students more exposure. Have you heard people say that, right? So they come from a background that is limiting in some way, and so we need to expose them to all of these things. I would suggest that is a setup for failure. So hope without a plan is a setup. So to your question, Stacy, why did some of those kids do well in the program, but after the program ended, they didn't do so well? Well, if you go back and watch it, what you'll notice is that the kids who had structured foundation support were the kids who probably would have made it anyway, right? Because grandmas were there, parents were involved, parent in some cases wasn't, but there were people, the church wasn't, they had a community that had expectations of them. And the kids who did not do well were the kids who thought that it was the program that was going to save them and not internalized it themselves, right? And so when we think about our students, is our school going to save them through our programming, or are we going to give them the tools that allow them to save themselves? One of the comments was Montre at the end says, "I don't care about that program. I'm going to be good anyway." And he ended up having some of the highest scores in the Baltimore area. So not only, so we have to recognize that part of our job is to infuse people not only with hope, but give them skills too. And so because hope without skills is a setup for failure, right? So I'm going to expose So I'm going to expose you, but I'm also going to give you some skills. It would be like if I gave each of you, 300 bars of gold, right? And I just set it in the parking lot. I'm not sure about you, but I can't protect that gold, and I can't move 300 bars of gold. So people are going to come in and try to take my gold when I go to try to, so it's a lot like that, right? So if you can think about that as a metaphor. All right, cool. Other things this week that you thought were intriguing, thoughtful. Have folks gotten a chance to get to the problem we all deal with, the NPR? So that's an old thing, and you've probably heard that before. But what were your impressions there in terms of equity?
Was that the podcast?
Yes, that was the podcast. Yep.
I think what was a little bit new for me was reflecting on integration and how important that is to be conscious of and make sure we're doing our best to have that happen. Mm-hmm. And there were so many emotions. I don't know how many you were wanting us to listen to, but I listened to all of it. I'm not sure if it was just one or the whole thing, but the intense reaction that I had toward the people in the town hall meeting that were sharing, it was a visceral reaction to the point that I had to stop for a little while. And I started sobbing, which again, I was like, you don't have a right to cry right now, just listen. And but with the girl just because I taught in K-12, and I can imagine that girl walking up and being so brave and then getting discouraged when she couldn't continue in her brave feeling, and applauding that mom who just, she's a tiger. She's going to do what she needs to do for her kid. And, but not all kids have moms like that. So then the thought pattern goes down that way, or any caregiver like that. So it was great. Thank you for providing that. And, it was a really good experience for me.
Okay. The thing that, at least as I think about the progression of these things, is that it's important for us to talk about opportunity gaps and not educational gaps, or that the people are deficient, but that the system, in fact, may not be giving what it needs, right? With that, I thought particularly the first part of that was really interesting, because people were like, I'm down with integration, but not my kid. Right. So not in my community do I want to do those things. And I wonder, in our own lives, how does that play out in other ways? Right. And so it's cool for those things to happen over there, or in theory, but not here, right? Not with us. And so, so I challenge, and Kevin says, he agrees with you, Kristen, that it was frustrating to hear those comments. Kevin also said, I like the Roundtable Discussion video from yesterday. Good to hear all those educators' perspectives. He meant today. So there is that. And so I know that we only have a half hour, so I don't want to take any more time, but any other thoughts or things that you'd like to share from this week's set of activities?
I do like that you just talked about in your own life. So thinking about, I have 5 kids. So would I strategically place them somewhere? What would I, they homeschool right now, but I mean, not right now. They're not, I'm working full time. They're not really doing much. But my parents actually normally homeschool them. But reflecting on, would I be willing to do that? Is that something that is on my heart enough, and I believe in enough to be anti enough that I would do that? I would send my kids somewhere in order for them to be part of a school. It's just an interesting thought.
And kind of piggyback on what Kristen said, I'm moved here from Maryland and Pennsylvania in 2018. I'm born and raised in Maryland, about 45 minutes outside of Baltimore, as a matter of fact. But I lived in Pennsylvania before we moved out here, in Gettysburg, of all places. And the reason I say that is because, I have 3 daughters myself, but my oldest is biracial. And as a white woman living in America, I never had to worry about anything. But in Gettysburg and some of the surrounding areas, I found myself, anytime we went anyplace new, I had to look around and scan the room to see if I was going to be somewhere that my daughter's going to hear stuff that she shouldn't have to hear as the biracial person, in a not very diverse area. So when we moved out here for my fiance's job, exactly, I immediately said yes without even any kind of thought, because I know that Washington and this area is so much more diverse and open and welcoming and accepting of people of, all shapes and colors and sizes and everything, So I was relieved, and I can say, thankfully, that she does seem much happier since we've been here. Not that she was necessarily visibly unhappy there, but you can see the improvement, and it's funny that you can see the improvement when you didn't even know that there should have been some improvement, if that makes sense.
So here's the funny thing about young people, and about human beings in general, but we're adaptive, right? However, there might be some things that we should not have to adapt to. right? So there's that. I also wonder, so I had a conversation earlier today with a group of people, and I just posed this question. Do you have a safety plan for your family? If an emergency happens, do you know where and how and all that kind of stuff? And then, and so some people said yes, some people said no, and they were, we talked about that. And then I asked a follow-up question: do you have a diversity plan for your family? Do you have a diversity mission statement for your family? And Andre, why are you saying this? This is a professional thing. Why are you bringing my family into this stuff? Well, that bleeds over into the rest of our lives, right? So for our classroom, do we have diversity plans, strategies? For our organization, do we have a diversity mission statement that says, this is how we're going to think about this? This is what we're going to do in our classrooms. This is how we're going to be inclusive. And it's something to think about. You don't necessarily have to have an answer for that, but something really to think about, because if we're goal directed and that's one of our goals, then we'll get there. But if we're goal directed and that's not on our radar, can I blame anybody? Can I fault people if that's not something that we've asked people to think about? So there's that. Julie, what thoughts?
Oh, wow, lots of them. Yeah, I just I keep thinking about the idea of how. To bring us back into the work that we're doing and how to integrate that, and especially now, knowing that our students have such different access to resources and being able to connect with them and thinking about that. But also thinking, my colleagues in advising and counseling are all taking this together, and so I'm excited to see the conversations that we can have about our practice and what we're doing and how we can, like you said, what is our diversity plan? I like that question. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So we are at the 30 minutes. If there's something additional folks want to talk about or chat about, I'm here, but I didn't want to hold people any longer than what they needed. I had the course locked down to do certain sections at a time, and then after a while I was like, you know what, that's goofy. So it's all open, so you can go do all of those things. There is a reflection each Friday that I ask folks to kind of do in a timely fashion, so that I can either give you feedback or we can talk about them, about those reflections. But those are down there. I wouldn't worry about the quiz stuff. That's more kind of practice stuff, thoughtful stuff for you to think about and work on your own. But I would appreciate those reflections for the week. And if you haven't done the stuff prior to that, that's cool. Do it and then do your reflection. Only so that you can feel good about your progression. So, well, any other questions or comments? All right. Well, with that, thank you so much for your time, and I will see you on Monday. We'll see you on Monday. All right.
Thanks, Andre. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks, Andre. Thank you.